sorry. It'll take you, if you scroll down, it'll take you to a donation contribution page. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay.
Sorry, I missed, I came in the middle. I'm so sorry. I came. So I don't know
Okay.
if we're talking about donation for
Oh,
your
just
page.
just if anybody would like to make a donation to support our class, you can go to my page on Jewish Experience and scroll down, and there will be a place where you can make a donation and for what, and that would be great to help support all of our learning efforts.
And
So,
and remind us, it's $10 a class or more? I forgot.
to sponsor, if we were in person, it's, I don't remember, like $5, $10 a class.
I think you went to 10
It's fine. I don't know if
when
we
you
raised
moved
it
to
that
Israel.
far.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I don't want to have a barrier. So we're not going to talk about those financial details. You'll see
Okay.
all of the options. If you would like to sponsor, the sponsorships are more. So go to my page and you'll see the different options, and we welcome anybody's participation. So thank you very much. We appreciate it. And hello, Carol, and hello, Beth Ann. Okay, ladies, let's start with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. We are on Parsha Vayera, which, these beginning parshas in Bereshit. So much happens, and there's so much in them. It's so dense. And while it does follow an historical time frame here, we also have to keep in mind that as familiar as we are with all of these stories and all of this narrative, what we need to know is why we are being told this information, aside from the fact that it's interesting and it's a great story. So let's take a look, just starting at the beginning of Parshas Vayera, and just briefly look at everything that happens in this parsha. So the parsha begins on page 79. We're going to take a look at just the sidebar that's written in the stone chumash here. So we started off with chapter 18, visiting the sick and hospitality to strangers. This is where Abraham is presented with the three strangers, the guests who come and visit, and he brings them into the tent and feeds them, etc. He will receive a promise also that Sarah is going to have a baby. He also, Abraham learns about the impending destruction of Sodom, and he argues with God. Continuing on page 83, Abraham intercedes for Sodom and tries to argue that God shouldn't destroy it if there are enough worthy, righteous people, which, as we know, there aren't. And so the plan of destruction goes ahead. Next page, the destruction of Sodom is chapter 19. And in this specifically, we have a lot of time and inches devoted to Lot and his wife and his family and the daughters who think that there's no one left in the world. And so they lie with him. Beth Ann, did you have a question? I see your hand up, but you need to unmute so I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was just when you were talking about the Jewish experience. They're having a holiday. I bought a table. If you want to come, you can come for free because I bought a table. Just
Thank you.
up for Waggy table.
Thank you so much.
And that's really all I wanted to say, but I'm sorry, I should have put my hand down sooner. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so then we have Lot and what his daughters, and they get impregnated by him, and they give birth to Moab and Ammon, and we'll come back to that. Lot is saved, and then we have in page 91 that Sarah is abducted, and so that happens with Avimelech, and that's a whole incident. And then Abraham and Sarah receive many gifts from Avimelech after she is released. And then we have the birth of Isaac on page 95, chapter 21. And Yitzchak, Isaac, is going to be circumcised. Hagar and Ishmael are going to be expelled. We're going to come back to that. Ishmael is going to be saved He's first is going to pass away from being hungry and thirsty, but he is saved. Continues on page 101, chapter 22 is the Akedah, is the binding of Isaac on the altar. And that whole event, we're going to come back to that as well. And at the very end, on page 105, we have information that tells us that Rivka, has been born. This, you could spend like a year on each one of these segments of this story. So what we're going to focus on for our time today is going to be, as I said in my email, connecting the dots. What is going on? If we know what's going on here, we will have a sense of what's going on here and now, of what's happening in the world and what we are all a part of. It's very hard to know that you're a part of something when you're in it. I remember when our daughter was at the University of Pennsylvania, she took one of her history classes, was on the 1960s. So we all lived during the 60s. I didn't know it was a class. I thought it was just my life. You know, we were just like going about our business. We didn't know that we were necessarily part of something. I mean, unless you were involved in the protests of the Vietnam War or something like that, we were just having our daily day and watching as things were unfolding, unraveling, or whatever was happening. But we didn't know that this was going to be a class later that people were going to analyze. So imagine your lives like we're having a class, and it's about Carol Plotka, and we're going to delve into like all the things that were going on in her life. Like, I didn't know I was a class. So we are a class, and our Jewish life is a class, and there is a history of the world that is unfolding. There is a journey that the world is taking that started at creation and is going to the time of Mashiach, of redemption, because God set the world in motion with a destination, with a purpose, and with a path. And that path is very, very, I don't know what the word is, indirect, very, very indirect. What we're going to talk about today are several pieces of the puzzle and how they come together. Specifically, we're going to talk about Lot's daughters and the birth of Moab, from whom, as we know, we're going to be mentioning a lot of people's names here. So if you have paper and pencil, pen, or something and want to write any of this down, that's great. You don't even have to have all the details. You'll get the general idea anyway, is fine. Just to know that you're part of something unfolding here. As we know, Lot's daughter has Moab. Moab becomes the Moabites. Ruth is a descendant of the Moabites. She is Ruth HaMoaviyah. Ruth is going to marry Boaz, and they are going to have a child who will then have child. And Ruth and Boaz are the ancestors of King David. And King David is the ancestor of Mashiach. So what happens in this week's parsha is the seeds of Mashiach are planted, because it's getting planted in the destruction of Sodom. It's getting planted with Lot's daughters sleeping with their father. It's getting planted with the birth of Moab, who's going to turn to the Moabites, who are a terrible people, but it's going to give birth to a wonderful woman named Ruth, who is going to join the Jewish people, marry Boaz, and then create the dynasty of David, King David, who will ultimately be Mashiach. When we say Mashiach ben David, Mashiach, the son of David. On the other side, when we know that Ruth gets married, the person she marries is Boaz. Boaz himself has a kind of a cloudy past because he is from the tribe of Yehuda. The line of Boaz came from Yehuda by accident, sleeping with his daughter-in-law and giving birth to children that then come down to Boaz. So if you're going to say what, like this is Mashiach, Mashiach is coming from these very cloudy, dark, strange places. So when we say connect the dots, the first thing to think about is these dots are hidden in very strange places. They are not obvious. And in fact, if anything, the story around them is murky, and yet that is what leads to redemption. So one piece we have now from Lot in here in this week's parsha with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is we have the beginning of the creation of Ruth and Mashiach. So hold that thought, Mashiach ben David. We also have in here the Akedah, the Akedat Yitzchak. So let's turn to the end of the parsha where it is talked about. And we're going to start on page 101 for the story of the Akedah. Chapter 22, verse 1 on page 101 says, "And it happened after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he replied, Here I am. And he said, Please take your son, your only one, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah and bring him up as an offering upon one of the mountains, which I shall tell you." Okay, this is the binding of Isaac. Verse 3, so Abraham woke up early in the morning and he saddled his donkey. He took his 2 young men with him and Isaac his son. He split the wood for the offering and stood up and went to the place of which God had spoken to him. Next page, and we're going to come back to look at several pieces within here. On the 3rd day of their travel, Abraham raised his eyes and perceived the place from afar. When it says perceive the place, the word is hamakom. That's the place. Now, you're familiar with that term, hamakom, because it's a name of God. So when you go to a Shiva house and you say the sentence for comforting the mourner, you say, hamakom yenachem etchem. May Hashem, the place, be a source, the one to comfort you. So to see, and he saw, hamakom merachok. He saw the place, which could really be a capital P, and it's referring to Har Moriah, which is the Temple Mount, and that's what he saw from afar. And Abraham said to his young man, "Stay here by yourselves with the donkey, while I and the lad will go yonder. We will worship and we will return to you." Okay, let's go back. We're going to ask some questions here. It says here, going back to page 101, chapter 22, verse 1, and it happened after these things that God tested Abraham. Question is, why does it say testing Abraham and not testing Yitzchak? Yitzchak is the one is going to be giving his life or being willing to give his life. Or why doesn't it say testing Abraham and Yitzchak? Why doesn't it say both of them? That there are many different answers to this, but the answer we're going to look at first is in response to verse 2, when it said, and he, God said, please take your son, your only one whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah. So why is this sentence written like this? Why doesn't it just say, and he said, and God said, take Isaac and go to the land of Moriah and bring him up there as an offering? Why does it say, go through this whole thing, your son, your only one, the one you love, Yitzchak? It's kind of like the Torah doesn't like schlep out words. If it's saying something, it's saying something for a reason. One explanation given is that God didn't want to startle Abraham by saying, take Yitzchak and go offer him as an offering. He starts off and says, take your son, your only one, whom you love, Yitzchak, that he's kind of breaking it to him slowly. So that's one answer. However, there is another answer that our sages say that God's words are in response to, that there's actually a dialogue, that Hashem is coming to Abraham and saying to him, please take your son. And that Abraham, this isn't in the text, this is our sages saying that Abraham is saying, I have 2 sons. I have Yitzchak and I have Yishmael. And the God says, no, your only son. And he says, well, they're each the only child of their mothers. Yishmael is the only son of Hagar, and Yitzchak is the only son of Sarah. And then he says, the one whom you love. Now, love is not just an emotion. Love means something else. But when he says, the one you love, Abraham says, but I love both of them. And we know he does. And then God says, Yitzchak. Why is this here, like this selection process? So what we're going to discover is that there's something going on, that there was a backstory conversation between Yishmael and Yitzchak. Yishmael and Yitzchak, who were vying for who's going to be the inheritor of the promise to Abraham, of the land of Israel, the Har Habayit, and the Jewish destiny. Who's going to be the one? Abraham was hoping that it was going to be both of them. How do we know it could have been both of them? Well, we know that because when it comes down a couple generations to Jacob, and Jacob has 12 sons, how many of them are the inheritors of the promise? All 12 of them. So it's not like, oh no, we can only have one winner. It could have been both, if both deserved it. Abraham doesn't see a difference between his sons Yitzchak and Yishmael. He loves both of them. God is going to make it clear that Yitzchak is the one and not Yishmael. How is he going to do that? Look at, oh, I'm sorry, I was going to say this, the conversation between Yitzchak and Yishmael. Yishmael, as we know, taunts Yitzchak. That's why Sarah says, get rid of him. He taunts him. He does things that are like trying to kill him, shooting an arrow like just past his head and like, oh, I was just doing some target practice. I didn't mean anything by it. Sexually abusing. There's all sorts of horrible descriptions of what Yishmael was doing to Yitzchak, and Sarah's like, get him out of here. That being said, Yishmael was 13 when he had his Brit Milah, when he was circumcised. He was already born when Abraham was given the command to circumcise himself. Ishmael was 13 years old. How old was Yitzchak when Yitzchak had his circumcision? He was 8 days old, like all of our baby boys. Ishmael taunted Yitzchak and said, the one who deserves the inheritance is me, because I went through Brit Milah at 13, and that's called Mesiras Nefesh, like to give of yourself and to sacrifice yourself. I did it at 13. I had a bar mitzvah student who mother had converted, but after he was born, so he needed to go through a conversion process before his bar mitzvah. And so he had already been circumcised in the hospital, but he had to have a procedure, and he was more freaked out about that than his entire bar mitzvah. So a 13-year-old boy having a circumcision says, I'm the one who rates over that. So this conversation continues between Yishmael and Yitzchak says, if God asked me to give up my life, I would do it. You gave up one organ, I would give up my entire life. So what is Yitzchak agreeing to? I would give up my life. That's why the test is on Abraham. It's not on Yitzchak. Yitzchak already agreed to it. So the question is, who is more deserving? Who is the one who's going to carry this forward? Is Yishmael part of the package or not? So now we're going to see where this is going to be revealed. Turn to page 103. Verse 4, on the third day, Abraham raised his eyes and perceived the place, Hamakom, the divine presence, really, from afar. And Abraham said to his young men, stay here by yourselves with the donkey, while I and the lad will go yonder. We will worship and we will return to you. Take a look at the commentary on the bottom of page 102. On the lower left-hand column. And you can see where it says, and perceive the place from afar. Is everyone with me? Do you see where it says that? Abraham saw a cloud hovering over the mountain and recognized it as signifying God's presence. He said, Isaac, my son, do you see what I see? Do you see what I see? Yes, Isaac said. And Abraham understood that Isaac had the decree of spiritual insight that made him worthy to be an offering. Then on the right-hand paragraph, he then turned to the two attendants and asked, do you see what I see? They did not. Noting this, Abraham put them in the same category as his donkey and said in effect, the donkey sees nothing and you see nothing, therefore stay with the donkey. Now the donkey in Hebrew is called a chamor. Chamor means physicality. It's not like, oh, you're such a donkey, like you're a bad word. It means you are too physically oriented. You cannot perceive the divine presence. So, Dorothy, do you have a question?
I'm sorry, where are you in one of the notes down below?
Yes, if you're not, are you in a Chumash or a Tanakh?
Yeah. Humash.
Okay, so it's on page 102,
Oh,
on the
two.
very, very bottom of the page on the right-hand side.
Oh, he then turned that one to the
Yes,
two.
exactly.
Okay.
So who are the two attendants that Abraham is with? The commentary says the two attendants are Yishmael and Eliezer. Eliezer, who will be featured in next week's parsha, in searching for a wife for Rebecca. Eliezer and Yishmael. So the question is, why was Ishmael there? What do we know happened with Ishmael just a few pages earlier that we already just mentioned? Does anybody remember what happens to
He was circumcised.
Ishmael? I'm sorry?
I thought you said that he was circumcised.
Yes, he was circumcised when he was 13, absolutely. But then we also see that Sarah says that Ishmael has to leave, that Hagar and Ishmael have to leave. So turn to page 99 and take a look at that. Chapter 20. God was with the youth and he grew up. He dwelt in the desert and became an accomplished archer. He lived in the desert of Paran and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Where was Ishmael living? It's like he was not living with Abraham anymore. He wasn't with Abraham and Sarah. He wasn't with Yitzhak. It's like, well, wait a minute.
He was with his mother.
He was with his mother, exactly. He was not with Abraham until the night when Abraham gets the command to offer your son. It says that was after 35 years, whatever, because we know that Yitzhak was 37 at the time of the Akedah, 37 years old. Ishmael was like long gone, but he came. Hashem orchestrated it for Ishmael to be coming to a visit with his father. Otherwise, the conversation between God and Abraham about take your son, your only son, the one you love, Isaac, if Ishmael is nowhere to be found, then what's the conversation? There's only one son in the house. Why was this necessary? It says Abraham needed to know, not just that he was listening to his wife get rid of Ishmael and his mother. He needed to know that Yitzhak was the right person. And that had to be demonstrated in some clear way. Now, I know this is all very new. This was totally new to me. This is ran by Daniel Gladstein and all the sources, all standard sources of what was going on here with the Akedah. what was going on here with this whole thing, the journey to Mount Moriah. Do you see what I see? Do you see spirituality? Do you see the divine presence? And Yitzchak is like, yes, I see it. And Ishmael is like, no, I don't see anything. He's like, you'll be staying with the physicality representative, the chamor. You'll be staying with the donkey. And I'll go with Yitzchak. It wasn't really until then that Abraham knew for sure that it was only Yitzchak who was to be his inheritor of the promise of the land of Israel and the Jewish people. Until then, he thought maybe Ishmael could also be, because he didn't see him. Now we have that quality with our patriarchs, because Yitzchak himself, what's going to happen in a few parshas when it comes to Jacob and Esau? Who doesn't see who Esau really is? Yitzchak. The mother sees, Rebecca sees, the blessings need to go to Yaakov, not to Esau. Sarah saw the blessing needs to go to Yitzchak, not to Ishmael. And it wasn't because Sarah was jealous. Having this clarity of who is the inheritor is clarified through the Akedah. Furthermore, the Akedah itself is considered what elevates Yitzchak to be the one who is the deserving person and through whose descendants the Jewish people will come. It says the Akedah is what solidifies the claim on the land of Israel and on the Har Habayit specifically, but also the land of Israel. So this is very interesting. The Akedah is what makes that secure, the willingness to do that. Yitzchak said, I would be willing to do it, and he almost was. We know that an angel had to had to take Abraham's hand and say, don't touch him. Yitzchak was totally willing to give. So the person who is willing to do something and prepares and does it, it counts as if it did happen. So in fact, it says that his soul did leave him and then it was put back in him, and that experience transformed him. It changed his ability to see the world, which is why he's described later as being blind, is that he could not see the physical world the same. You wouldn't say it was post-traumatic stress syndrome. You would call it post-traumatic spiritual syndrome. It's like when you see like the angels and heaven open up, you can't be the same after that. He had an experience that transformed him. It's very interesting. The Muslims have a holiday. It's called Eid al-Adha. Okay. Eid al-Adha. That's a different conversation. That's a different path. Eid al-Adha. What is Eid al-Adha? It's a Muslim holiday that Muslims around the world celebrate. Abraham taking Yishmael for the Akedah. And they say it wasn't Yitzchak, it was Yishmael. Just even a US stamp for their holiday. Now, you can say, fine. You can believe whatever you want. You want to think it was Ishmael, so think it's Ishmael. And we might think that this doesn't make a difference. However, I can tell you that our lives on a daily basis are being impacted by this twisted belief system. Because what they're trying to say is the land of Israel belongs to us. The Temple Mount belongs to us. Is based on the Akedah. We're not going to talk about the election in New York, but we've got a swing here that's very, very challenging. We have a perspective like the Jews, it's not the Jews. And we're not talking about sharing. It's not a sharing thing. It's like it belongs to us. The Al-Aqsa flood for the war of October 7th was about the Temple Mount. It's not about two states. It's not about occupation. It's not about Gaza. It's not about any of that. As our soldiers said when they went into the homes in Gaza, every single home had a picture of the Temple Mount on it. They have one focus. I'm like, and where are we? I know some of you have ordered the pictures of the Har HaBayit, of the Beit HaMikdash to have. It says, and the Jewish people, we're just like in La La Land. We don't even know that there's anything going on, and yet we are in the middle of a cosmic battle. So what happens if there's a battle and you don't show up because you don't even know you're in it? It's like, we are in it. So this is the Akedah. And when Yitzchak comes through with this and Abraham comes through, the reward for it is, let's go to the end, page 105, chapter 22, verse 15. The angel of Hashem called to Abraham a second time from heaven, and he said, by myself I swear, the word of Hashem, that because you have done this thing, you haven't withheld your son, your only one, that I shall surely bless you and greatly increase your offspring like the stars of the heavens and like the sand of the seashore. And your offspring shall inherit the gate of its enemy. And all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your offspring because you have listened to my voice. So it says, your offspring shall inherit the gate of your enemy. In Hebrew, there are two words for enemy. One of them, and let's take a look at the Hebrew here in verse 17. Verse 17, it is oivav. Oivav, and you can remember that because it sounds like oive. It says like when you have this kind of enemy, an oivav, it's oive. That's an enemy. There's another word that's called a sona, and it comes from the word to hate. So it says the Jewish people have been plagued since the beginning of time with two kinds of enemies. A soneh, someone who hates, and an oyev, another kind of an enemy. And those two are the descendants of Esau, the Amalek Haman group, and the descendants of Yishmael. One's an oyev, one's a soneh. And what's worse, it says the descendants of Esau are the ones who hate us, but sometimes they'll deal with us nicely. And the oyev, the oive, are the descendants of Yishmael. And that theirs is in a brutality that is beyond our comprehension. Because Yishmael is described even before he's born that he was going to be a wild ass of a man whose hands were going to be against his brothers and his brothers against him. Is going to cause havoc throughout the world. It's like, and here we are, the Jewish people in the middle of all this. It says, what are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? It says, what we're supposed to do is to strengthen ourselves as Jewish people, to hang on to our Torah, our mitzvot, our acts of loving kindness, our moral and spiritual clarity, and don't get confused, don't get sidetracked, as sadly we can see that how many of our brethren got very, very sidetracked in New York and voted for somebody whose philosophy would be to doom them. It's pretty crazy, but that's how it's been. There were Jews who supported Stalin. There were Jews who supported Hitler. There were Jews who supported, in the Spanish Inquisition. There's been Jews who find themselves on the wrong side all the time. But that means that we have to work even harder to have clarity. So what do we do about this and what's going to happen? It says there will be a process of clarification. There will be a process when these enemies will be defeated, and they will be defeated by two different Mashiachs, two different saviors. Anyone remember who we have as what are the two different Mashiachs that we have? Etta.
Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef.
Etta, did you want? I'm sorry.
I ditto that.
Okay, I know you did. Thank you, Etta.
Mashiach ben
David.
Yosef are we
Yes.
in that period now? Do we
So
know?
we're not, I won't be able to talk about that because I don't know. So I'm just going to describe what it is. So what we understand is that Mashiach ben Yosef in Moshe's blessings in the parsha of V'zot HaBracha at the very end of the Torah, he compares Yosef to an ox, a shore. Okay, an ox or a shore. Says that Yosef is the one who will, I'm sorry, we can't go into like this, what's happening, it's all happening together. So we're in the middle of it. So it's very hard to see what exactly is happening. Mashiach ben Yosef is the one who is going to save us from the descendants of Esav. Esav himself is called by our sages, not in the Torah, but in the Midrash and in the Zohar, which is the book of splendor, are referred to as oxen. I don't know if that's because they work hard and like that's the image of Esav, like the Western world. You can kind of think of like rugged individualism, the ability to plow the earth, an ox. So Esav is called an ox. Yosef is called ox-like. And so it says the ox will counter the ox. So the Mashiach ben Yosef will be the one who is in charge of defeating the enemies that are the descendants of Esav. Then we have the descendants of Yishmael, who are called Chamor, just like in this week's parsha where it says, and you'll stay with the donkey. The Chamor, the donkey, are the descendants of Yishmael. But we have our Mashiach ben David. Christians have taken on this image a lot, which is they have the Mashiach who's going to come into the world. And what's the Mashiach going to be doing? How is the Mashiach coming into the world? Does anybody know have heard that?
Second AC, who'll get up the third time, according to the church.
Okay, Rhoda?
The third
He's coming
coming.
on a donkey.
Riding on a donkey. What does that mean? To ride on a donkey means to have mastery over. That if you are sitting on the chamor, if you are sitting on top of the physicality, that means you have mastery over it. It says Mashiach ben David is going to bring the mastery over the descendants of Yishmael, which is why he's described as coming, sitting on with humility on a donkey. It says in Zechariah, so this you can see in actually, this is actually in Tanakh, in Zechariah chapter 9, verses 9 through 10. You can see this, the sentence where it says, your king is coming humble and mounted on a donkey. So it's not just, oh, he's coming on a donkey and he's humble. That donkey represents the challenge of Yishmael. The challenge of Yishmael is through Mashiach ben David. The challenge of Esav is through Mashiach ben Yosef. One's the ox and one's the mule. Now you might know a Jewish law about mixing species that says you cannot put together an ox and a mule to plow your field. It's considered unkind. It's like all these things. But at the spiritual level, it says, if you bring an ox and a mule together, it says they will destroy the world. What does this mean? It says, if you bring together the negative powers of Esav and the negative powers of Ishmael, they will destroy the world. So Rabbi Gladstein, who gave this shiur, talked about one of his relatives who had been in the concentration camp and had seen the head of the concentration camp, I don't know, somebody higher up in the Nazi party, who had invited the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem to come to the concentration camp. And together they sat and they had Jewish men walk in front of them. And as he said, beat them in a way that they would never be having children again. And that was their entertainment as they sat together. It says, you bring together the negativity of Ishmael, the negativity of Esav, and you have an absolute disaster. On the other hand, they both have positive, because nobody says that these people are supposed to be destroyed, They're supposed to be refined and modified. So, for example, Esav, which is the power of Western civilization, has an incredible amount to give us. And the spirituality, the potential but undistorted version of the spirituality of Islam has a lot to give us. They have tefillah, they have prayer, they have circumcision, they have self-sacrifice, they have dedication, they have all of these things. It's just so twisted that it has become destructive. And then we have seen that even in the tunnels of Gaza, we talked about this last time with Bar Cooperstein, or when they calling his mother, with Bar Cooperstein's mother, and she said, my son's in the hands of God, and so are you. And the terrorist response was, Kol hakavod geveret, you are right, ma'am. There is an inherent respect for God. Again, it's so twisted, it's destructive, it's so twisted, but it's there. So the world is not meant to be everyone else disappears and only the Jews populate the world. We are not into like the Christian rapture thing where everybody, is going to go up and believe in Jesus and the rest of the world's disappearing. We don't want the rest of the world to disappear. We want the rest of the world to have a tikkun. So we're going to talk about one tikkun that did happen according to our sages, which is such a nice thing to hang on to. So let's talk about it. King David, we already talked about how King David's roots were very murky, going back to Lot's daughters, Moab, Boaz coming from Yehuda and Tamar, and that kind of sullied background, and they come together. Beth Ann, if you're saying something, I can't hear you because okay. That they came together. So this is very, very murky. But King David himself, and this is not in the text, but here's how it goes. King David's mother's name is not given in the text, but according to our sages, her name was Nitzevet, which comes from the word like Nitzavim. It means standing firmly. Nitzevet. She was married to King David's father named Yishai. Just so you know, in our community in Israel, we pass by the area where Yishai lived. It's like, Machane Yishai. It's so funny. It's like just like a street sign. Very interesting. Yishai, who was a descendant of Ruth and Boaz. Yishai had either 7 or 8 sons. And he always relied on Boaz's psak halachic ruling, that a Moabite woman can join the Jewish people, even though a Moabite man cannot join the Jewish people. And that therefore his line, Yishai's line, was clear and good to go from Boaz and Ruth. Toward the end of his life, people get strange ideas toward the ends of their lives. Some are good ideas, some are not good ideas. He decided that maybe he was wrong, and maybe he wasn't legitimate. He himself, Yishai, and that it wasn't a good idea that he came from Ruth. So he told his wife, Nitzevet, putting you to the side, we're not having any more children because they're not legitimate. So Nitzevet stays in the home, but she's to the side. Yishai, however, tells Nitzevet has a handmaiden, which feature often in the Torah, has a handmaiden. We don't know her name. We'll just call her handmaiden. And Yishai says to the handmaiden, I'm going to live with you, and any children we have would be by definition like some other halachic definition, and I will free them, and then they'll be fine, but they won't be Jews. They'll be something else. So Yishai is planning to be with Nitzevet's handmaiden. Nitzevet's handmaiden is loyal to Nitzevet. And she's like, this is not right, that I'm going into your husband. You should be going into your husband. Now we're going to have a very familiar dress up as somebody else event. handmaiden gives Nitzevet her clothes, and Nitzevet goes in and camouflage with Yishai, and she conceives that night, and she conceives David. However, according to Yishai, he wasn't with his wife, he was with handmaid. So when after 3 months he sees Nitzevet is pregnant, it's like it's a shanda for the family. But it was his wife, and as Rabbi Gladstein said, it's not good for shidduchim to put on your family whatever, that your mother is a harlot. So we're just not going to talk about it. And when the baby is born, we're just going to kind of scoot him away. So when David was born, he was kind of scooted away. And so he's out in the fields, and he's sent with the sheep, and no one pays any attention to him except for his mother. Now you could have a whole conversation. Why did his mother say and see it's fine, whatever. That's a whole other conversation that I'm not equipped to answer. And it doesn't become at all even semi-clear until the prophet Samuel, at God's direction, comes to Yishai's house, like Cinderella and the evil stepsisters, and comes with the glass slipper, looking to appoint a son of Yishai as the next king of the Jewish people, after a failed kingship by King Saul. Samuel interviews and sees all of Yishai's tall, handsome, amazing, wonderful other sons. And God is like, nope, 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 nope. Samuel's like, is there anybody else? I'm like, well, there's David out in the field, and they bring him in. Samuel sees him. He's like, oh, he looks like Esau. This couldn't possibly be the right person. And God is like, that's him. Yishai is like, what do you mean? And we always say, David ben Yishai, David, the son of Yishai, just in case you thought that he was fathered by somebody else. He was fathered by Yishai. This is just like Yehuda and Tamar. Now we have another layer of this, and David is born. And then, as we know, later becomes king. Why are we talking about this now? What went wrong going back to Sarah with Hagar and Ishmael? Whose idea was it to bring Hagar into the family for Abraham to marry?
Sarah.
It was Sarah's idea. And she said, and I will be built up through her like a surrogate mother. Hagar was her handmaiden and her student, her protege. And when Hagar gets pregnant, she starts being arrogant and nasty to Sarah, saying, you know what? You're not really such a righteous woman, because you've been sleeping with Abraham for how many years and you never got pregnant? I got pregnant right away. So clearly, like, you're a fake. She was rude, mean, and that's why Sarah's like, she has to be out of here. And she sends her away. Hagar was to have been kind of the same as Bilhah and Zilpah were to Rachel and Leah. They could have built the Jewish people, but because Hagar was so disloyal to Sarah and so disrespectful and so arrogant and the opposite of what it means to be a mother of the Jewish people, she had to leave. Our sages say that Nitzevet's handmaiden was a Gilgul, a reincarnation of Hagar, and that she came to do a tikkun, a repair. That Hagar mistreated Sarah and should have treated her better, and she could have then been part of building the Jewish people. Is Nitzevet's maidservant, handmaid, is loyal to Nitzevet and makes it possible for King David to be born because he's conceived that night. And so she is given, like, she has a hand in redemption. It says that this was a hint that in the end, those who try to undo us will actually have a hand in rebuilding us. And so I have to say, when I think of the abominable, beyond comprehension, no words to describe what Hamas has done to the Jewish people. At the same time, they have awakened in the Jewish people a seed of redemption. We went last night to hear speakers. One was a seriously injured soldier, a lieutenant colonel reserved who was injured, like, with 7 kids. He came, he was so inspiring. And then there was another man who came from this organization called Israel Destiny Foundation. And they're working at educating Jewish people about their Jewish identity. And he said, you would not believe, even though what we're hearing about is Kaplan Street and all the protests and blah, 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 it's like a lot of noise. He said, you have kids in secular schools in Tel Aviv that are demanding from their principals that they want to have time to put on tefillin in the morning. It's like, what? The principal's objecting and the kids are demanding. Or they want to have Torah study, or they want to wear kippahs in school, or they want to do this, they want to do this. Like, what? And you have the thousands of people who are wearing tzitzis and I want a kippah on their head, and they are doing all of this. It's like, where is this coming from? It's as if the distorted spirituality of the Islamic extremism is somehow making contact with the spiritual roots of the descendants of Isaac. And it's as if Ishmael is taunting Yitzchak. What happened when Ishmael taunted Yitzchak and said, your Brit Milah was at 8 days, mine was when I was at 13? Did Yitzchak say, you're right, you know what, I'm not interested in the whole thing, bye, I'm secular? It was that goading that actually made Yitzchak say, if Hashem wanted me to give up my life, I would. Who was the cause of this power, this gevura, this strength of Yitzchak? Ishmael. It's like, well, that's crazy. On one hand, it looks like a complete, we are here to destroy you. It's like, well, you may be here to destroy me. And we said before that Ishmael was like trying to kill Yitzchak in a way that was socially acceptable, like by barely missing with his bow and arrow and oppressing him and harassing him and all of that. But remember that we are like a sleeping lion. And if you goad a lion enough, they can be really fast asleep, but at some point they wake up. Yishmael's spirituality has actually goaded the Jewish people into reclaiming their own spirituality. It's the most bizarre story ever. You would expect that the horrors of everything that have happened would cause a fleeing away from, like, where was God? In fact, one of the hostages I saw, I don't remember now his name, said that one of his captors said, so where's your God now? Which is interesting because in one of the Tehillim it says, and then other nations say, where's your God? And he thought about it and he said, well, what would my mother say? I love that. Your Torah Imecha, the Torah of your mother. What would my mom say? Good question. Where is God? And he said, my mother would say, God is testing me. And he's right here. Yes. And if you had the presence of mind, you would say to the terrorist, and God's testing you too, and you're failing, but I'm winning. So this bizarre juxtaposition of what looks and has so many destructive elements to it is at the same time generating a response that is completely unprecedented and unexpected. It's like, what? So it's not just like, what? The Moabites come from an incestuous relationship between Lot and his daughters. That's so disgusting. And then Yehuda is sleeping with his daughter-in-law. And then like all these things, it's like, what? It's like, yeah, we found those dots in really weird places. and we found faith in the tunnels of Gaza, and we found faith and a desire to connect from the distorted perspective of the Muslims. The radical Islamic is waking up the Jewish people. We have our work cut out for us. I was a little disappointed to see that a rabbi in New York, who I know, who thinks that the Jewish response now to the election of Mandami is to beef up our efforts combating anti-Semitism. Our efforts are beefing up our young people's connection to Judaism. That if you had, this is if you, the statistics are very distorted when it said the percentage of people who voted for Mamdani, this like people who are unaffiliated, disconnected, don't even know really that they say they're Jewish. It's like by a loose definition. The people who are engaged did not vote for him. That we need to have some clarity over what our real work is. If we think our work is, we're going to put all our efforts into combating anti-Semitism, we're going to miss the boat. Because the anti-Semitism is there to wake us up to what the real problem is, which is we have people who are disconnected. When the Jewish people know who they are and what their mission is, they will be united and will be able to function. So the other part of this speaker last night, the soldier who spoke, the colonel, he had 600 people under him. He said the unity was unbelievable. It didn't matter if you're Sephardi, Ashkenazi, religious, not religious, you're poor, you're rich, you're from this area, you're from Tel Aviv, you're from Jerusalem. It did not matter. The unity was unbelievable. But what makes this possible? What makes it possible is having a common mission. Unity does not just get created like in a kumbaya, let's all hold hands. It does not get created by that until there is a big wake up for Jewish people to realize we are the Jewish people. We are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people. God gave it to us in order to fulfill the Torah in this land and to be a light unto the nations. Until that becomes the rallying cry, the achdut, the unity cannot come together because there's nothing in the center holding it together. And it can't just be we're afraid of people who are trying to destroy us. The soldiers who had a mission, just like in the desert when the encampment with the Mishkan in the center, then all of the tribes could function harmoniously. But if there's nothing in the center that is powerful enough and compelling enough, and that power can't be what we're not. It can't be, well, what's bringing me together is I'm anti-Netanyahu. What's bringing me together is I'm anti-Haredi. What's bringing me together is I'm anti-secular. That's not a unifying, that's not a theme. That brings people together temporarily, but it's not unity. Unity is where you have a Mishkan mission. We are the Jewish people. When we get that, we will be able to mobilize. And that's what this organization is trying to do, is to do the education and bring people together. It's not trying to make everybody religious. It's just like, you need to know who you are. We talked about in previous times that there was one of the hostages who never knew the story of Joseph. It's like, how can you not know that? And then once he learned it, it became such a power for himself and for his family. So we're just talking about basic Jewish education and connection to God, other Jewish people, and the land of Israel. When we have that, the anti-Semitism will take care of itself. Our job is to strengthen ourselves, not to be pounding the pavement constantly, even though we have to do that. That's not our mission. When we think our mission is we have to take care of anti-Semitism, we will fail. That's not a mission of the Jewish people. Nowhere in the Torah does it say your mission is to defeat anti-Semitism. The other work is actually harder. The real work we have to do is harder because it's with each of our families and our friends and our coworkers and our neighbors, of bringing people into Abraham's tent. And that takes us back, and we'll conclude with this. How did the parsha start? The parsha starts with Abraham welcoming the guests into his tent. Welcoming guests in who looked like idol worshipers, not his people. Those are our people. These are not our people, those are our people. As Beth Ann said, there's the challah bake, designed to bring Jewish women together. I don't care what you're wearing or what you think or where you belong. Come, Jewish women make challah. And the happiness and joy that is always at those challah bakes, and I've seen videos from around the world, is the simple pleasure of connection to who we really are. When we know that, the rest of the world's things, those things will move away. They will move away. But we have to reclaim our inheritance. We need to be the Jews who God is not asking us to give our lives. Thank God, most of us, we don't have to give our lives. We need to live our lives for Torah, God, Judaism. That's the real binding that we have, is to bind ourselves to our actual heritage. Ladies, this Shabbos is a powerful Shabbos, a Vayera. Hope you enjoy and realize that what's going on in the world is a boilerplate that was set down here in this parsha that is continuing to unfold and ripple. And I can't imagine how Abraham and Yitzchak and Sarah, how these people would be able to even relate to the idea that there was going to be a real nation and a cosmic process that was going to go on to get God's plan for humanity to actually unfold and reach its destination. We carry this. This is our inheritance. It's our privilege. It's a heavy load. But as someone said, most people, if you said, I have a heavy load to carry, can you help me? Would say, what is it? If it's garbage, I'm not interested, it's too heavy. But if they said it's diamonds and crown jewels, you'd be like, I'm your person. So the load that we carry, we call it the yoke of the heavenly kingdom, which makes us think that we are oppressed by it. But this yoke is one of diamonds. And God willing, we can carry it and carry it forward. And our people need us, each and every one of us. We have some really challenging times that we are going through and that we are going to continue to go through. And God willing, we will experience the unity of purpose and focus and mission to be able to be successful, so that we can come to the end of the parsha when Hashem promises the Jewish people that because you have done this thing, I will bless you and greatly increase your offspring like the stars of the heavens and like the sand of the seashore, and your offspring shall inherit the gate of its enemy. And all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your offspring, because you have listened to my voice. The prerequisite is we listen to Hashem's voice. That's what allows the other nations to be blessed by us. If we think that there's another path, history has shown that there isn't. So here we are again, going through it, and God willing, we're in the gifted and talented group here of listening to Hashem's voice and making that very real for us and the people around us. And God willing, Hashem will continue to bless us, make more miracles for us, and see success, and the Jewish people should thrive wherever they live. Thank you again to Penina for your sponsorship in memory of your grandmother. Her neshama should have an aliyah. We should only hear Besorot Tovot. All of the remaining remains of hostages should come back to the land of Israel for a kavura, for a Jewish burial, to bring some sort of peace to their families. And I wish a good Shabbos.
Yashar Koach, amazing, fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Alan.
How many more halalim are we waiting for?
Oh, excuse me, 1 second. We will not meet next week. Our kids are coming in from Israel. So
That's
for
amazing.
our granddaughter's bat mitzvah. So they're
That's
coming in on
amazing.
Wednesday. So I will,
Enjoy.
God willing, be busy. So I'll be in touch with you. I'll send out
Okay.
an email
Love
just
you.
so you know.
Yeah. Yashar
Thank
Koach.
you.
I have to go. Sorry.
It